All right, so today we're going to jump into the story of King David, but we're going to look at a part of his life that maybe you're not as familiar with. See, this isn't just about the hero who took down a giant or the powerful king on the throne. This is about a man who had to lose absolutely everything to figure out what prayer is really all about.
You know that feeling, right? It's got to be one of the most frustrating things. You're praying, you're asking for guidance, you're looking for help, but the situation doesn't just stay the same, it actually gets worse. The problems pile up, things get darker, and you start asking yourself, is this even working? Is anyone listening? That feeling of just wanting to grab the wheel and fix it yourself, well, that's exactly where this story really gets going.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to look at two kings, both chosen by God for Israel, Saul and David. Now, they both start out with God's favor, but man, their stories could not have gone in more different directions. And the reason why? Well, that's the whole point of what we're talking about today.
I mean, look at this contrast. It's like they were running on two completely different operating systems. You had Saul, who absolutely looked the part of a king, tall, handsome, the whole deal. But his connection with God was, well, it was all business. When God gave him a command he didn't really like, he wouldn't just say no. Instead, he'd find some clever, religious-sounding excuse to do his own thing. He was way more worried about what people thought than what God said. And then there's David, the forgotten shepherd kid. But out there, in the middle of nowhere, he was learning to trust God, not as a panic button, but as his first move against, actual lions and bears.
In this right here, this verse is the key to the whole thing. God literally skips over 7 of David's older, more impressive brothers to pick the one they didn't even bother to call in from the field. It wasn't about the resume, it wasn't about how he looked, it was all about the direction his heart was pointed. This one idea sets the stage for everything that comes next.
So David gets anointed as the next king. You'd think, okay, life's about to get a whole lot easier for this guy, right? Nope, not even close. What actually followed was this long, brutal period where that faith God saw in him was about to get seriously put to the test.
Just look at this timeline. We're not talking about a couple of bad weeks here. We're talking about years, a decade, maybe more, of David living as a fugitive on the run. He's constantly moving, hiding out in caves, at one point even pretending to be insane just to stay alive. And all this is happening while the current king is hunting him down. This was no victory lap. It was a grueling survival marathon.
But here's the amazing part. Through all of that, his response is just remarkable. He gets not one, but 2 perfect chances to kill Saul and just end the nightmare. And he won't do it. Why? Because he believed that the same God who chose him would be the one to put him on the throne, and it would be in God's time, not his. It was in the darkness of those caves that David wrote a lot of the Psalms, basically pouring his heart out to the only one he felt he could rely on.
But, even the deepest faith can get worn thin. After years and years of running and trusting and waiting, David hits a breaking point, and he makes a choice that completely changes everything.
Now listen really closely to how this is worded. For the first time in a very long time, the Bible doesn't say David inquired of the Lord. It says David thought to himself. He stops asking God. He starts listening to his own fear, his own exhaustion. And he comes up with what seems like a really smart, strategic plan to finally get himself out of this mess.
And this best thing he could do? Oh, it turns into a complete trap. For 16 months, he's living this complicated lie. He joins up with Israel's enemies, the Philistines, and has to pretend he's on their side. And his deception actually works so well that the Philistine king orders David and his men to march with them into battle against Israel. Think about that. The guy who wouldn't even touch King Saul is now about to go to war against his own people.
So that clever plan he cooked up to save his own skin, it backed him into a corner he couldn't get out of. He traded his trust in God for what felt like control, and in the process, he was about to lose the very thing he was destined to be.
Just when it seems like things are at their absolute worst, God steps in a really harsh but ultimately merciful way. David gets spared from having to fight Israel because the other Philistine commanders don't trust him, so they send him home. But the home he comes back to is gone. His whole self-made world has just collapsed.
He doesn't return to a safe haven. He returns to smoke and ruins. While he was gone, raiders came in, burned his town to the ground, and kidnapped all their wives and children. Every last one. And his men, these guys who had been with him through thick and thin for years, are so broken and furious that they turn on him. They start talking about stoning him to death. His plan didn't just fail, it blew up in his face, leaving him with absolutely nothing and no one. And this
This is the moment. This is the pivot. He's lost his plan, he's lost his home, he's lost the loyalty of his men, all the external things he was leaning on are just gone. So he has no choice but to look inward. And there, in the middle of the ashes and the anger, he finally remembers the one source of strength he'd been ignoring.
So David breaks his 16-month silence. He asks God, should I go after these guys? Will I catch them? And after all that time, after that huge mistake, you know what's incredible? God's answer is instant. It's clear. Go after them. You will definitely catch them and rescue everyone. There's no lecture. No I told you so. Just an open line waiting for him to finally use it again.
And what happened next was this incredible, miraculous victory. He gets everything and everyone back. But the real win here wasn't just rescuing his family. It was the lesson that was burned into his soul in the ashes of that town, a lesson that would completely redefine his relationship with God for the rest of his life.
And here's how we know the lesson really, truly stuck. Look what happens after the crisis is over. Once he finally becomes king, when he's powerful and everything's going great, he doesn't forget. Before a big political move, he asks, should I go up? Before a major battle, should I go and attack? Years later, when there's a famine in the land, what's his first move? He inquires of the Lord. He never, ever stopped asking.
See, what Ziklag taught David was that prayer isn't an emergency lever you pull when the plane is going down. It's the continuous conversation with the pilot that keeps you from flying into a storm in the first place. It's not about getting God to approve your plans, it's about staying in constant contact so His plans start to become your plans.
This verse, which David wrote after another close call, just sums it up perfectly. It became his new mission statement. Not just when I'm in trouble, not just when I need something, but at all times. The conversation was now going to be 24/7.
And that really brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? So often we treat prayer like we're sending a desperate text and then just staring at the screen waiting for those 3 little dots to appear. But David's story gives us a totally different way to think about it. What if the goal isn't just to get an answer to our one big question, but to simply keep the conversation going at all times, in all things? What would change if we focused a little less on the emergency broadcast and a little more on just staying on the line?